Hello, this is Andrew Musgrave from Ye Old Magic Blog. I'm here again with Tyler Erickson, and today we are going to talk about something that is very near and dear to your heart, Tyler. Secrecy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say my lungs. Yeah, secrecy. What about it?
How do you feel about it? Do you think, do you get the impression that maybe magicians have sort of lost their way in
Well,
terms?
I have my ideas, but I'm not going to tell you.
That's okay. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I appreciate you spending time. No, come on. I know that you spent a lot of time sort of comparing the way, not just the way that magic's evolved, but also the way that magicians have evolved, especially like the idea of the new school magician versus the old school
Sure.
magician.
Well, here's the long and short of it. The value of a secret is that there's a secret. It's not necessarily what the secret is, a secret move, a secret technique, a secret gimmick, whatever it is. The point is that people can sense when there is information being withheld. And the magician is, the character of the magician is one who is a keeper of secrets. And so, if you want to create the feeling of mystery in your audience, you have to be capable of keeping secrets. And it is not something that's as automatic as you might think, because particularly in today's day and age, the way that secrets are bandied about for free on YouTube and this and that, it creates a culture where there's not as much punishment for letting secrets go loosely. I mean, there was a time when if you were around other magicians and let's suppose one magician performed a trick and the guy next to you says, "How does he do it?" and you explained it, you get pushed right out of the group. Somebody would hand your ass to you. That's not the way you did it. But now people don't even bat an eye. It's considered to be standard fare for if you know the answer, you just tell the guy next to you.
Right. Oh, you're not talking about a situation where like magicians are trying to help each other come up with something. You're
Right.
talking
Well, okay.
just trying to figure something out.
Yeah, I guess even within that, I have everybody's got kind of have their it's not a moral compass, but their own magic compass, I suppose, as to where they stand on that. My feeling is number one, when it comes to the sharing of a secret, if someone has just gotten into magic and you're working on something that you know is way beyond what they should be doing now, and they ask you about it, that you have the opportunity to say, while I'm happy to help you with it at some point, it probably isn't the kind of thing you want to spend time on now. It's like when somebody asks me about a guitar they should buy they've never played before, I don't necessarily say buy this super expensive guitar simply because we don't necessarily know that they're going to continue to follow through. So you can invest a minimal amount of money into, you don't want to go too cheap and that's a crap guitar, but you can buy one at this price and that will do you well until you develop better techniques, at which case you'll want to move to the next step. There's always a sense of that there's a proper beginning place, whether it's martial arts or music or magic or carpentry or whatever you want to go to.
Right. You spent some time behind the counter actually selling magic to people in magic shops and
I did.
such. And every now and then, you do a trick for someone and they say, I want to buy that. But then the idea of method might come up. Or maybe it wouldn't. Did you pre-screen them to make sure that they weren't going to get
Well, my
access to the real
job
stuff?
as a magic demonstrator is to kind of quickly assess where a person's at and then show them things that are appropriate for them.
Right.
And again, well, you may make the wrong call here and there. By far and large, if you've got their best interest in mind, you're going to be more helpful than you are hurtful. Because I know it sounds a little harsh to be thinking of yourself as ultimate decider, but that's kind of what you do. You look at the person, you say, I can tell they're not the kind that wants to put in a lot of practice. Sometimes they just flat out say, I don't like to practice, I just want something easy. But other times they're not as forthcoming and you kind of have to make some decisions. But your goal is to give them things that they will be happy with and that they can use. And that really is the key phrase. What can they use? What do they need right now? And try and get them connected to that, because we're all curious. We're all kids in a candy store. Anything we don't know, we want to know. And there is a benefit to being kind of coaxed in a given direction. And there's also a benefit to delayed gratification, to not knowing a secret right away and having to earn it.
Right. Yeah. Sort of like trying to work your way into the inner circle, like
Yeah.
if there is an inner circle. I mean, there's always like lots of talks about like people wondering if there really is an underground and whether or not these people get together and they like share like deep magic with each other.
There will always be inner circles and underground connections, but it's kind of like Michael Amor had an essay called In the Men's Hut. And there's a lot of truth to that. It's just the perception of this inner circle that that kind of drives interest.
It's
When
very
you
romantic. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're in there, a lot of times, well, okay, I have one experience that I think kind of captures it for me. When I first went to Fechter's, which is the big sleight of hand thing, and I get to meet all these famous people, and I sat in the lobby, and I'm sitting next to a guy who I'd seen one trick in print. His name was Vic Tribuco, and there's this little manual, it's called Packet Tricks, and he had one entry in there, and I just remembered his name because it was one of those kind of names it's hard to forget, Vic Tribuco. And we're sitting there, and I'm noticing that I just like what he's saying, what he's talking about, and he seems to be liking what I'm talking about. And we get to talking about one of these super easy tricks where you are showing two cards and putting them in the middle of the deck and then apparently pulling them back out, but in fact it's a bluff and it's two different cards that appear similar. And we get all nerdy about these little nuances of how this is going to happen. And here I am amongst the best of the best, and we're talking about a self-working trick
Right.
that's in all of these Magic for Dummies type books. And I think that's kind of what the inner circle is. It's like getting all wrapped up in very minute details that a lot of people just don't see as important. But at a certain point, they become really coveted things. Charlie Miller talking about when you do the penetration move with the ball and you lift the cup, that the ball beneath the cup has to move a little bit. If it's sitting dead still, it just doesn't look right. Little bitty things like that take on great magnitude.
So even things like a lot of the time, the secrets might not even be like a new move or something like that, or a new series of moves, but it might be like how to sell something. Like I know one of your favorite forces with a deck of cards, or one that you hold in high regard, is a simple crosscut force. And I mean
Absolutely.
that's like one of the first forces anybody's ever going to learn in their life, and and you're of course capable of dozens of ways of like devious ways of forcing a card.
I think that's part of it. That the perception from the audience's standpoint, if I've done my job, is I create a sense of I can do things. I've obviously studied and I'm capable. And part of that works to my favor with the crosscut force because the prestige that they're looking at, they wouldn't think you would stoop to doing such a thing, such a bold scam, if you will. They would consider that beneath you. So it doesn't enter their head that you would be doing some sort of self-working type thing. Whereas if I was 12 years old and looked like I just got into Magic last week, that's absolutely the kind of thing they'd be looking for. So even if the 12-year-old were doing everything technically correctly, they may stand far less chance of getting away with it simply because of the lack of prestige.
So you think things like understanding not just like secrets or effects, but the way that effects relate to each other, that like those are secrets.
Yes, they are.
Like routining, that can be a secret.
And to go back to what you're asking before about what's happening in the inner circle, it may have been that there was a time when being in the inner circle meant being privy to certain moves and whatnot. But I feel like, particularly given the technology and the desire for fame, people are publishing their moves and getting them out there very quickly and for anyone to see. So I don't think the inner circle is going to be about moves per se, but more likely it's about timing and it's about structure and about little details that added together give you some massive benefit. Things that aren't going to be of interest to a lot of people who are just looking for eye candy or a quick fix or this or that.
Right. I think another thing that's kind of interesting too is that just with the internet and with legal and illegal means, there's it's no big deal to go out and find all these secrets. In fact, I think we're almost like drowning in methods and effects, and I think to a certain extent the latest secret might be being able to figure out which amongst all these like thousands and thousands of tricks actually works. Which one registers with an audience. You've got like Ed Marlowe's revolutionary card technique up there, but this is a lot of stuff to go through. The secret might be someone being able to give you a filter through which to figure out which moves will work for you and which ones won't.
It's very true. And I think that's the new, shall I say the word, paradigm of Magic. It used to be you couldn't get access to secrets at all. You could go to the library and get some beginner's books, but you weren't going to be able to find out what a zero shuffle was until you jumped through some serious hoops. And now that's just not the case. However, you're going to go out there and all of a sudden you'll be hit with everything from the Manfred shuffle to the Truffle shuffle to the Gray shuffle to the Push-Through shuffle, and you won't necessarily know what's good and what's not. And sooner or later, you're going to be looking for someone who's a filter, who's giving advice and essentially mentoring you, whether it's actively as a person who sees you and you see them, or passively where you're reading their blog or you're following their advice from somewhere, but you're ultimately going to try to find someone to filter for you because there's so much information. I don't know that it's practical for a person to just go out there and buy blindly in the hopes that something good is going to happen.
Right. How do you feel about exposure?
Well, I feel hmm, there's a lot of aspects to it. The thing that bothers me the most is that I can easily combat a person coming in with knowledge, meaning they walk up and they're like, oh, yeah, my brother does magic. I know all about the X, Y, and Z or whatever. And I can now un take apart what they come in with. They know about a double turnover, so I can avoid the use of that move, or I can simulate it and bait someone into something and then use canceling methods in some other fashion. I can deal with that.
Actually, just to interrupt really quickly, you mentioned before that sometimes it's a useful tactic to use if you're meeting somebody for the first time, asking them about magic just to try to glean that information out of
Yes,
them.
absolutely. I'm a big fan of doing reconnaissance and knowing where a person's starting from. And also, I'm keeping my eye out because many times people won't tell you what they know. So if I use some of the common tells that would be attached to, say, a multiple turnover or a thumb tip or this or that, just to see
Yeah.
if they're going to bite on it. And, if there's absolutely no reaction, then you know you're in the clear. And if you see someone clearly smiling, smirking, leaning, whispering, or whatever, you know who you've got. But bring me back to where I was before.
You were talking about people coming in with knowledge as
Yeah.
opposed to leaving, and I assume where you're
Yes,
going with that.
exactly. And so the problem is that now with technology the way it is that people can get instant access to information. So I walk up, you know nothing about magic. I do something with a ring and a rubber band, and you pull out your smartphone, you type in the words magic trick, ring, rubber band, and within a matter of seconds, you have someone giving an explanation of how a trick works. Now, it is going to depend on how accessible and popular the trick is, but let's just assume for a moment that I am doing classics. I'm doing Sponge Bunnies and Ring Flight and Ambitious Card or whatnot. Those secrets are there and they are immediately there. Crazy Man's Handcuffs has been a huge casualty. People get to that lickety split. I mean, you barely even have to put rubber band magic trick, and that's the first thing you get is an instructional. So we're going to find that people cope in different ways. Either A, they are just going to do what they do regardless of the audience's ability to search it and then just run away and let whoever's going to look it up and not care.
Right.
Or they're going to develop new material and much like the magicians of old, they will hide it. They will go through all lengths to avoid being videotaped and to showing it around other magicians and things like that. And I think that's where I am headed right now. I am dropping more and more of things that were classic, even though I had touches on them, because, and this is how it goes back to the problem of the searching afterwards. If someone comes in with knowledge of linking rings, oh, I know how that works. You've got a ring that has an opening in it. If you do a routine where all the rings are examined, they walk out going, oh, it's not what I thought it was. I don't know. I give up. But now what happens is someone comes in, they see the ring routine, they walk out. They had no idea how the thing works in the first place. They get online tells them, oh, yes, well, you can't have all the rings examined. And the person goes, oh,
Maybe I
well,
missed
maybe I
something.
missed something.
Yeah.
He must not have had all the rings examined. And they accept a lesser explanation as being true.
That would really suck if you actually let all
Yeah,
the rings be examined and then they go
absolutely.
out and say, "Oh, I guess I just missed the one
Mm-hmm.
that he, whatever."
Yeah, and you're going to get more and more of that. So now you have the problem of not only the classic methodology being exposed, but even the plot itself is overexposed, and therefore you may get undermined by someone else's faulty explanation.
And that's really tough too because it would seem that okay, if you're a creator, let's just say you're like Angelo Carbone or something like that. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
I believe so.
Okay, I hope so. Sorry, Angelo, if I'm not. If you're a really smart guy like that and you come up with this kind of stuff, and let's say you come up with it with the intent to perform it for yourself, and you're going to be able to set all these filters in place. You're going to be like UF Grant and not letting anyone see your fancy rope trick. Then you can protect that secret, assuming you do it well,
Right.
right? And assuming
Sure.
you don't you'll flash anything, so you can protect that. Um, what are we to do? Like the rest of the magicians out there, the 99% of everybody else who in the end have to rely upon the methodologies of other people that they never came up with.
That is a question I don't even have a good answer for.
It's
I
tough,
think
eh?
I think the answer is probably suffer. You will suffer. There is not much you can do. But it is, however, not accurate to make it sound like people, normal, everyday people, cannot make the adaptions, because a lot of times all you need to do is change something cosmetically.
Right.
Maybe it was originally done with coins, but you do it with bottle caps. And suddenly now, when they search for it, they don't get anything because no one else does it with bottle caps.
Presumably, well, okay, I guess what it's 2011 right now. That would probably hold us for a few years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But something else, like Tommy Wonder used to talk about like different combining approaches, right?
Sure.
So, for instance, let's just say you do some sort of effect, it's a knockout effect, and requires a gaff in order to work or be as clean as it's supposed to be or whatnot. And then in the aftermath, you just wring the gaff out of there.
Sure.
Um, so you're using almost like, or let's just say you're doing the crosscut force.
Mm-hmm.
They get to shuffle to their heart's content ahead of time, and then just in one instant action, you just plant the force card where you need to be, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're done. Like so, you
Sure.
you,
There you accessorize self-working things with sleight of hand, with gimmicks, certainly. But even that is not going to save you if the plot you're approaching is one that is highly publicized. I can do the cleanest version of the ambitious card, and again, the person walks away, goes looking, and finds all these different entries on how it works, and gets enough information, goes, well, it must have been some of that. And they are just content with whatever it is they've been fed.
oh, so the fact that they like come to the conclusion that there must have been a method.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that would seem to think that you'd have to actually flip your presentational approach around and like just become like Juan Tamariz.
That's exactly what I think is going to happen. We'll have more and more people working hard to sell all the conditions of what makes what they're about to do impossible. And you just kind of have to cross your fingers and hope people retain that. So when they see the explanation, they go, no, it's not that because he did this. No, it's not that either because he did this.
Right.
And just hope that they are willing to, well, first of all, the idea is to get them to walk away with a memory of something that truly did not happen, to reprogram them. So by the time they go searching, they've already got it screwed up in their head.
Right.
But it's going to be tougher and tougher given that people can now secretly videotape you because it looks like they're talking on the phone or about to take your picture and they're recording. And there is, as far as the way society views it, they don't care. It's not like that is considered to be rude.
Well, it's being done in every other venue.
Absolutely.
So why wouldn't, unless we were afraid of something, why wouldn't we allow them to do that? And it's
Now, there are a couple of parallels that I think are worth looking at. Number one, and I believe this is correct. I don't have all the details, but I believe this is true. When Houdini was performing and was circulating around and whatnot, his brother, who went by the stage name Hardin, also did an escape act, and they essentially posed as enemies. And it was all a theatrical facade. They were, of course, brothers and perfectly happy at that. But what Houdini would do is, after he'd performed doing a certain illusion for a while, some form of escape, he would then give it to his brother. And his brother would start doing it, but then almost immediately Houdini would go out and say, yes, all of my my imitators are using this method, and of course that's not what I do at all. And he would expose the actual method that he'd been using. And Hardin played a part in this, of course, to get this illusion out there while it was being exposed. And I don't know all the nuances of it, but what it basically boils out to is Houdini had to stay ahead of the pack, because as soon as you had something that worked, everybody would start imitating you.
right.
It's not like this just started happening. And so we're talking about different facets of the same problem. And it has to do with popularity. When movies came out, it killed vaudeville because people would work for 20 years to craft an act that lasted 10 minutes. And as soon as it was on the screen, everyone had seen it and they wanted something different. And so what we're talking about now is adaptability, in the sense that you get some material, you work it, you do it for a while, and then you let it go and you do something else. That's probably what we're going to end up with, is more and more people moving through material in phases. Now I do this, a year later I'm doing that, a year later I'm doing that. And just like comedians have to continually update their stand-up in a lot of cases, whether it's because they had an HBO special or they're a topical comedian and then they have to adapt to the changing times in politics and whatnot. But it is about not being able to just sit on your laurels and do what you've always done for 20 years.
Right, and you get guys like Darren Brown, and they're coming out with a new show like every couple of years, and it seems like it's this all new stuff,
Yeah.
and then everybody's paying attention. Like if you set the pace,
Well, I mean,
you don't have
Darren Brown, obviously, a better example would probably be Copperfield, who, like, how many times did he do a brand new show year after year
right.
after
Yes,
year
yeah.
while doing world tours and all that? It's just mind-boggling. But there you go.
But it is interesting though that they sort of set the pace, and by being at the front and setting the pace, they don't ever have to. Well, they don't have to worry as much about playing catch up,
Right.
I suppose, because by the time someone turns around and maybe cracks the code of the trick,
Hmm.
they've got a whole new thing out, and that whole new thing is capturing the attention of everybody
Yes,
else.
exactly. I think you will see people who can't stay on top of the wave. Like I'll point at Chris Angel because if you look at a lot of his YouTube clips, people are saying you can clearly see how this has been video edited and blah blah blah, and they take it apart piece by piece and they make their own video responses and link them to his performances. And after you get a reputation for doing that, people are just going to start to fall away. You, they only have to see you cheat once with camera trickery and whatnot to just kind of dismiss everything under that banner.
Right. As soon as you have a cut, even an innocent cut of some kind, you're in
Well,
trouble.
I don't know. I mean, yes and no, because I understand what Chris Angel was doing with the cutting, the idea of trying to keep the look modern. That when Mark Wilson first came on TV and he said there will be no cutaways and no camera trickery, that people could handle just staring at a box with a wide focus for the next 5 minutes. But I don't know if that's true. I think you might just have to have either the camera cutting or at the very least have some sort of a cop style moving camera system, which is probably the smarter. But really, once someone has said, oh, look, when he goes out of frame, this happens here, or when the camera turns off, this happens here, or they use computer generated imagery here, whatever it is, once you're known for it, it's going to stick on you.
Right. It'd be like a mentalist being caught out using a stooge or something like that.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
pretty much in trouble.
That would be a very, very astute thing to, if they got caught with a stooge, then that will explain an awful lot of mentalism. Not everything, but an awful lot. And so it would be horribly damaging.
How do you feel about guys like Penn and Teller, who sort of, a big part of their shtick is that they expose methodologies and they expose like a lot of time, sometimes working methodologies. Sometimes they'll create something only in order to expose it. How do you feel about guys like that?
Well, I think Penn and Teller have a really good grip on where they sit within the magic spectrum. And when they expose something, they are very courteous to magic when it comes to what they're exposing, and they also have a knowledge of how the audience is going to take it. So it's almost like if Penn and Teller are going to tell you how a trick is done, it's a dumb trick. They'll tell you
Well, they
that
expose the cups and balls.
they did, but they didn't. I mean, no one who sees what happens there goes home and knows what they did. They could not. All they could say is they had stuff in their hands and they moved quick and they put it there. And I have to say that the average person that watches Cups and Balls is probably going to come to that conclusion anyhow.
Right. Well, I guess that's an important point. Is that sometimes a lot of the stuff that they're exposing, it's earlier you talked about the intuitive solution, right? They had their Fool Us show that was on the British channel there, and where the guy was using a blank deck and someone peeked inside, and then he was able to predict what card he was thinking about.
Yeah,
And
and
then
they came right out and said how that whole thing worked. And I guess I didn't like that so much, but oh well.
at the same time, a thinking person is probably going to say, "Well, it must have been something like that."
I don't know. I feel like there are a decent number of people that would take the Darren Brown route and go, wow, maybe he really did impress upon them some sort of an imagery off the card box, this and that. So well, not everybody, at least some people would have gone down the road the magician was trying to send them on. And Penn and Teller just basically called bullshit on it, which is what they do. Fair enough. But within their own show, looking at them as performers, not as the whole fool me thing.
Right.
I think they are very, very good at kind of singling out certain things which they'll expose and make them seem kind of corny or trite. And then they will fool the hell out of you with something and make you feel like, now that's a real secret. That's something good. And they will keep those secrets. So
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Is that some stuff they'll just give away, and then other stuff they'll like keep to themselves.
yeah, and it's not arbitrary. They are very, very careful about what they're going to expose and what they're not.
Yeah, actually, what was one of their things? Oh, we don't have the Pete McCabe book here. Teller at one point was talking about an act that they had where they would just basically tie up Teller, they'd handcuff him, or they put like hoods over him and whatnot, and they will say, "This is the most amazing escape you will ever witness, so long as you keep your eyes closed throughout it." Right, and then
Right, and they give the audience the choice of either closing their eyes and being amazed or keeping their eyes open and seeing how it's done.
right, and that's kind of interesting too, because at that point, they're making a statement, and Teller said this: we're making a statement about like secrets and about like the disappointment of having them revealed to you, and whether how people how it's the audience's choice.
Right.
I mean that's a very strong artistic statement.
It is a strong artistic statement, and I think there's something similar but not identical. And I know how my brain tends to work. Had I not become a magician, I still have memories of this, seeing a magician do something and instantly wanting to dismiss it as mechanical. That if there was a coin and you put a cup or a card over it and the coin disappeared and it appeared on the other side of the table under a card or a cup, my mind went to there's a hole in the table and a piston system and a conveyor belt and it pulls the coin in and it pops it out somewhere else. And just these crazy Rube Goldberg type devices would explain everything. And so at the point where someone is exposing magic, like for instance the Penn and Teller cups and balls, and you see that it is nothing more than the movements of the hands, you at least can go, "Wow, that's hard. That's that's not mechanical at all. That guy is working for it." And so there's at least a level of appreciation for the skill involved. It lets you know that it can be done that way because many people have no concept of what sleight of hand is, but they have a great deal of exposure to modern technology. And so, of course, they're going to go to what they know.
In the end, though, are you hoping you never get featured on a Penn and Teller show?
Well, it, people have asked me about the Penn and Teller thing. I've been asked it a couple of times. And they say, "Do you think you could fool Penn and Teller?" And my honest answer is yes. Yes, I do. I honestly think I could fool Penn and Teller for the same reason that if someone says, "Do you think someone could fool you?" Yes. Yes, I do. There are magicians out there that will fool me here and there. It's kind of spotty. You don't necessarily know who's going to fool you and when, but it happens because I've got a brain, and the brain works using these patterns that we've come to understand, and magicians work off of those patterns and manipulate them. So you're always vulnerable. For as long as you have a brain and use it, you are vulnerable to something, and you can only know so many methods. And if a person is very, very good and finds something that just essentially you weren't thinking about at the time or you missed when it happened, they will fool you. And it's okay. I don't mind the fact that I can be fooled by things. I don't get fooled all that often anymore, but it happens here and there. And when it happens, I delight in it, particularly. Well, sometimes I want to know how I was fooled, and other times I don't. But the point being is that they're just Penn and Teller. They're just two guys, and honestly, I think it's just Teller. I don't think Penn is really the brains of magic. He certainly is part of the team and a showman and all, but I think Teller is the real one with most of the magic knowledge of how things work. And so there are so many principles out there. I hate to go to cards, but cards have everything from stay stack to Gilbreth principles and just a ton of things. The problem is, if you ask the question, could I fool Penn and Teller and be entertaining with it? I don't know.
That becomes a much more
It's a radically different question then, because A, I'm going to be putting so much emphasis on trying to fool them that I will probably be all sweaty and gross and mumbly, and B, it's not something that I care about. I don't care about fooling someone like Penn and Teller. So if you went in there, it's almost like, what was it, Big Blue, a machine that was devised specifically to defeat one chess player.
right.
It wasn't a machine designed to defeat anybody who played chess. It was specifically designed to beat, was it Kasparov? I forget.
Deep Blue or one of
Yeah,
those.
Big Blue, Deep Blue. Anyhow, the point is that he felt kind of screwed because they didn't just build a smart computer; they built it to beat him. And so, if my goal is to beat Teller, yeah, yeah, I could sit there and dig and dig and dig and find something that you either know it or you don't, and odds are he just wouldn't know it, and I'd be like, there, do you know how that works? No, I don't. But would he care? Probably not.
Yeah.
He'd be like, yeah. So
that's probably one of the downsides to that whole show is that in the end they might get fooled and they might have a chance to go to like Las Vegas and open for somebody, but the stuff that fools them might not be as good and might not play to the audience as the stuff that doesn't fool them.
yeah, yeah. I think there has to be some sort of pre-screening that goes on of some. Well, I would hope, because again, if let's just suppose I found some sort of obscure card trick with some weird principle that they couldn't explain, and so I fooled them. I wouldn't want that to get me on stage in Vegas. That should not be the qualification. I understand what they're getting at, and I applaud them for it. The idea of someone coming out of nowhere and doing something wonderful for them, and and I think that, well, John Archer is a good example of that. He just came out there and did his envelope thing, and they're like, "What in the hell happened there?" That was cool. That's a lovely moment. That was great theater.
Yeah, the audience loved it too. That
And
was
it
the
was
thing
a
that was
great
really
routine.
that was the thing that it was interesting though, was that the audience, first of all, they loved the routine,
Hmm.
but then they were also really, really super keen on the fact that he had actually fooled Penn and Teller. Like they
Hmm.
wanted him to
Oh
succeed
yes,
because
absolutely.
they liked the routine.
Yes.
Yeah,
And let's face it, when people watch something and it fools them, they're kind of secretly hoping that it fools the other guys too.
right.
Like
Because
I'm not in
they
the
don't want to feel like the only dummy in the room. Yeah,
exactly. That's a big part of the dynamic of magic is not wanting to be the only dummy in the room. That if you look to the people next to you and their mouths are open and they're big-eyed, you're like, oh, sweet, I can let it all out. But if they're nodding knowingly and whispering to each other, you're like, ah, crap. Makes you want to think harder and get to the answer before someone has to explain it to you.
right. It's interesting though when you're talking about like trying to hunt down some sort of like obscure principle that Teller won't know and then just nailing it with it. Uh, this is interesting if we go back to the recent Chris Capehart lecture
Yeah.
when he came into town. And he did something and it was just a card trick, and it fooled you.
Oh
It
yes.
fooled you really hard,
Oh, really
and
bad.
yet it was out of a book that you knew. You know, like the key principle was talked about. Now Capehart
Yeah.
had thrown a little bit of extra stuff
I
on
would
there.
be I would say first of all, when he explained what he had done, I didn't recognize it. I was like, oh yeah, I read it in that book. I mean, it just was not in my memory bank, but that's beside the point. There's two ways that I can have when I'm fooled by something, have it sit. I'm going to tell both of these stories because I think they're both relevant. When I was in Texas, I lectured out there back in the early 2000s, and I'd met this guy, and he, just average kind of guy who did magic, and he'd been in my lecture. He liked me a lot, and he said, "Let me show you something." And he opened up this little box, and I think he had coins in there and this little jewel. And he took this little red jewel out, and he stuck it in the middle of his forehead, kind of like someone from India, and proceeded to talk in this little accent and do this coin trick. And I think he did a coin trick, and it was an okay coin trick, but didn't blow your skirts up as the case would be. But after this whole thing was done, the coin was done, he took the little jewel off his forehead, and he put it on the back of his hand. Then he put his other hand over that hand, like a foot over it, and that thing jumped like it had been muscle passed up into that other hand. And I'm like, I know it's not a magnet. I know it's not strings. I have no idea how that just worked. And it was just mind blowing. And I said, don't tell me. I don't want to know anything. And I just left the room. Just leave me alone. I don't want to know. And I ended up out there the next year, and I came back and I said, I got to tell you, from being here last time, there's a lot of famous magicians, but the best thing I saw was that thing you did with the jewel. He goes, oh, let me show you how that works. I'm like, no, 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 no. But I couldn't stop him. He had to tell me how it works, and it turns out that the secret is as good as the effect, that he's like essentially a freak, and that's what you have to be in order to make that work. And so there's no way that I was ever going to make it happen. But I was trying to have at least one thing in my head that I had no idea how it worked for the rest of my life. I like the idea of just having something, and that I was
Just
going
the
to do.
burr in the saddle,
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
yeah, just something that I could go, I saw this guy do something, and I have no idea how it works, and I'm never going to know. I wanted something like that. But the Chris Capehart thing, had he not told me how it worked, had I just seen it, it would not have impressed me as much. And the reason is because it was a card trick, and I just would have done as I said earlier. I would have assumed I must have just missed X, Y, or Z because there were explanations
Right.
that would cover it. I just didn't see any of those things happen. But I was willing to say, well, I just wasn't paying close enough attention because I was several rows back and cards kind of went out of view a little bit here and there. So who knows what it could have been. It would have fallen into the just another card trick kind of thing. A prediction is up on stage, someone shuffles a deck, cards are dribbled, and the spectator stops the dribble themselves. They're the ones dropping the cards, and that card is the one that was predicted. The methodology, though, is so damn clever and practical and well thought out that it just filled me with this warm feeling like, oh man, he really got me on that. Because you could have asked me, how did that work? And I could have given you a dozen answers, and they all would have been wrong, and they would have been wildly wrong. They would have been nowhere close to where the actual secret lies. And that's what I love about it. I mean, I I wasn't just off by a little bit. This guy, I say marked deck and it's a crimped card or something. I'm like, six of this, a half dozen of the other. But yeah, it really burned me. And in this particular case, I didn't have a point of reference. But there's been times where Juan Pablo got me with it was a dollar bill in lemon, where the dollar bill was signed. It vanished very cleanly. Any lemon was picked. It was clearly a free choice. He cuts it open, and there's the bill inside with the signature on it. What in God's name was that? And the secret turned out to be one of those straight from the very beginner's books, but he did it very, very well. And he had just enough levels of cleverness on there, little touches that concealed it from what it was. And so, again, No one's safe. Anybody can be fooled, and it's cool. I don't feel. I know there's some out there that feel like it's an attack on their ego and they have to know how everything works. But I'm telling you right now, there is not a magician out there. I don't care how smart they are, that isn't going to get burned by something somewhere. It's just going to happen.
And I guess it's, you mentioned this before, it's worthwhile for a magician to go through that
Oh
experience so
God,
that they can
yes.
remember. And I guess wrapping this whole thing up, sort of, as motivation to hold on to these secrets and like
Hmm.
sit on this stuff. Don't just blab it out to anybody, because that, if you get fooled and you really enjoy it, that's not, you have that opportunity to give that experience to someone every day with relatively easy stuff.
Yeah. Well, there to wrap it up, I will hit what I think are the major points from this discussion. Number one, it's okay for you as a magician to be fooled, and in fact, it's something you should seek out because you need to remember what it's like to be the layperson and your brain just goes all fuzzy, like what and what was that? Could it be this? Could it be that? No, it can't be those things. Oh my God! Oh my God! And that mindset. Just remember, because that way, when you're performing for someone, you can kind of live vicariously through them and their reaction. Number two, that the value of a secret is that it's a secret. And sometimes the best thing you can do for a magician is to keep a secret from him because it endears it with a certain value, and it might just be protecting him from spinning his wheels should he be looking for something that really honestly isn't going to help him at this point. If we were more interested in helping someone rather than just sounding smart because we've got an answer, I think magic would be better overall. And so, I guess wrapping up on the idea of secrets, everybody should practice keeping secrets and then letting them out as they see fit. My mentor, who would share with me great secrets from the world of gambling, not from magic, would tell me, "I'm not going to tell you you can't tell anyone about this, but be careful about who you tell." So he put it on me, and I think that was the smartest move he could have ever done, because I was very careful about who I shared certain secrets with that he had given to me, and it gave them value because he made it clear to me how much they meant to him. And I think that matters.